Hey, Dick, so good to see you.
How you doing, brother? Good seeing you again.
All right, this is a tough subject, big subject to cover, and I'm excited to ask you this question. Most people are asking this question, so let's go ahead for it. Why is there suffering in this world?
Yeah, of course, when God created the world, it was created perfectly. The problem was he gave man one command: don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And of course, man ate from the tree. And that's what we call the fall. At that point, man was put out of the Garden of Eden. Of course, later on, the Garden of Eden was destroyed by the flood, so there was no way back in. But that's when suffering began, when Adam and Eve sinned. If Adam and Eve hadn't sinned, there would never be any suffering.
Hmm. So let's go deeper then. Do all people suffer or just Christians suffer? How do you differentiate that?
No, all people suffering. That's one common thread. In fact, most of what people try to do is avoid suffering. And of course, there's no avoiding of suffering. You're going to suffer. This world is a world that's falling apart. It's running down. That's what sin did, was start to corrupt the world. And like rust in metal, it's corrupting it more and more, and corrupting us, corrupting our culture, our society. And it's like, so that's a real problem.
So what's the remedy? Was there any hope?
Well, of course, the remedy is Jesus and love. He who loves is born of God and knows God. He who does not love does not know God. If we loved one another, sacrificed for one another, lived for one another, what a world we live in. That's the world Jesus came to bring.
Um, Going deeper again, have you gone through suffering and how did you overcome that thing?
Yeah, I underwent a lot of suffering. I was suffering greatly when I came to faith. My parents had divorced when I was 17 years old. I was off to my freshman year in college, came home for Christmas break, and my home was gone. I had five other brothers and sisters. My parents had moved to California. I went to Connecticut school. Our house was in Massachusetts. They were gone. I came home, there's nothing there. I was so full of bitterness and anger toward my parents. I went into a depression for the next 6 or 7 years till I finally met Jesus.
And what happened?
Well, one of the football coaches at Brown University, where I was coaching, I was doing graduate work there, was a Christian. And I overheard him talk to a football player about Jesus. At that point, I was really seriously considering suicide. And I thought, well, if this Jesus thing might work, then maybe it would go. And I really did like this guy, Hank Small, who was the coach. So I went over to him and said, Hank, can we get together sometime? And he goes, yeah, sure, whatever. And we got together and I asked him, I said, what's this Jesus and what it's got to do with anything? And that's when I heard the good news.
So how did you personally overcome suffering at that time? What happened personally?
Well, Hank introduced me to his spiritual father, a guy named Russ. And Russ was about my dad's age,
Mm.
in his late 40s. So I was in my mid 20s at that point. And so Russ took me under his wing and, like a good spiritual father, showed me how to read the Bible, how to apply it, how to love your enemies, how to do good to those who despitefully use you, how not to repay evil with evil, which of course was what I'd done at that point. You hit me with a rock, I'm going to hit you with a sledgehammer. So needless to say, I didn't have any friends because, of course, everyone's going to let you down. It's like, you let me down once, that's it, we're done. No wonder I had no friends. No wonder I was all alone in the world. So you look at Jesus, he's hanging on a cross. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. I'm like, what? How can this be? He's God. He's Jesus, and he's forgiving them. And realized forgiveness was such a central part and something I needed to learn how to do, how to forgive others. Because, of course, in this world, you're always going to be sinned against. That's part of the nature. We're selfish, self-centered little beings, and we're going to sin.
So the remedy is forgiveness. That God forgives us and then you forgive others.
Right,
But
because God forgave us for me for huge amounts. So here I'm required to forgive my brother just a little bit. So when I
wow,
compare it to how much God has forgiven me, it's beyond comparison.
wow. Thank you for sharing this very difficult and hard question. Thank you for answering all those questions I asked. Thanks, Dick.
You're welcome, brother.